My name is Joanne Charles. I am a New York native, born in Brooklyn and raised on Long Island. I went to undergrad at Syracuse University and I went to law school at the Nova Southeastern University Shepherd Broad Law Center. I'm currently an attorney at Microsoft, a senior corporate counsel in the Privacy and Regulatory Affairs team, and I live in Jersey City. What drew me to law is there were lawyers in my family who I grew up watching. My mother's grandfather was a lawyer, and her uncles are lawyers. My uncles and aunts are lawyers. So I was familiar with the practice, but the practice of corporate law was new to me, in that most of the attorneys that I knew practiced either in law firms or in government roles. When I was a public affairs communications consultant for the Jamaica Hospital Medical Center in New York City, I had an opportunity to work with the lawyers for the medical system, and law was something I had always been interested in. But my writing teachers at Syracuse said, no, you should stick with writing. And they just wanted me to stay a writer and not give up being a creative writer to be a legal writer. Now that I've seen what legal writing is, I understand that advice much better. So I had this training in writing, which has come in very, very useful in my career. Went to law school because I saw how the practice of law could help people in ways that were not what you see on TV. The lawyers at the Jamaica Hospital Medical Center made it clear that if we do our jobs, then people who need care can show up here and get care. And that was profoundly motivating to me. Health and wellness was always very important to me, but I didn't want to go to medical school. I faint at the sight of blood, so can't do that. And I think there was sort of the exposure to what the life looked like. There was an interest in the practice. And then there was this opportunity that was presented to me because it was a different shape and a different type of experience of being a lawyer. So those three things combined is how I ended up going to law school as a second career and practicing the law now. I'm going to go back a little bit and talk about what I did before law school because it's actually relevant. So after graduating from Syracuse, I went to the Newhouse School of Communications there. And I got a job working for a tech magazine right out of school. And what that was at the time was very much looking at the experience of being online for users in the early days of the mass platforms and everybody putting up web pages and web advertising. So it was really understanding tech as the industry was developing. After that, I kept my hand in it. So I stayed involved with the tech space. And then once I went to law school, even though the focus of my practice was healthcare, it was digital health. So it was how technology was supporting healthcare innovation. Now, I joined the American Bar Association when I was a law student, and stayed involved through the education and the programming that the organization provided. And when I was working at Microsoft, was able to do a lot of public speaking about healthcare, technology, and innovation, and how those were intersecting. And through that work, I was approached to consider applying for a leadership role on the Science and Technology Committee. So the American Bar Association is broken up into different committees depending on your practice. So if you are a lawyer for a finance company, you're in a different committee. If you're a lawyer for the government, you're in a different committee. Or you could be in both, depending on what part of government you work for. But I am a member of the Science and Technology Committee, and I am currently serving as the co-chair for membership and diversity of that committee. As a goal of this committee, we are looking to drive not only membership, but understanding about diversity, education about diversity, and amplification of diverse voices, diverse spaces within the industry. Now, there's some interesting things about STEM that contribute to what looks like diversity in the legal profession. So the entry for a lot of people in this space is IP. IP lawyers tend to be white men. And the numbers of women, the numbers of people who are of African descent, who are Pacific Island descent, who are Asian, those numbers skew lower traditionally. That is beginning to change, but what you have is a lot of people who are entry level in their career and leadership that does not reflect them in terms of diversity. You have lone wolves who are out there who have been trailblazers, and what we are seeking to do is really look to amplify, as I said, their roles, and then have them talk to young attorneys to help them understand how they got where they are, what challenges they faced. A lot of the challenges are still present, unfortunately, in the legal profession, but in STEM as well, as I understand. But how they did it, what they wish they had known, and how they would advise people who are entering the profession now. So really bridging that communication and driving and understanding that being a sci-tech lawyer does not mean you look one way. What our committee does is focus on membership and diversity. That's broken up into two places. One is developing membership. So it is tying members into additional education materials, helping members understand what type of advancement opportunities they might have or might be interested in learning more about. And then on the diversity side, it is amplifying specific types of work and individuals who are doing very interesting work, with a focus on those individuals being of diverse backgrounds. And so diversity is a broad spectrum, and we're not just talking about racial and ethnic diversity. We're talking about gender diversity. We're talking about sexual orientation diversity, age diversity, national origin diversity. There's a lot of different things that can really lead to a diverse set of voices that will speak to science and technology and the law. And all of those voices are important. They all can have a really positive impact in improving outcomes for everyone who our work touches. And so helping those voices have a platform and helping them see others who are in the space and using their platform is something that we're working on designing content to address. It's a multifaceted problem. I think you have problems at every stage. You have a lot of interest and not a lot of clear communication about how to translate that interest into a job, especially into non-traditional jobs. So if you are what I do is ancillary to STEM. I am not in a lab every day, but what I do supports that work. Understanding the basics of work of the tech experts that I work with is a huge part of my job. If I didn't understand it, I couldn't be effective. So if you have an interest, you might not have an interest in a strict science, you might have an interest in something else, and that is enough to break through. So there's a lot of communication that has to happen at the education side. So now you take the next step into the recent graduates looking at jobs. And as you mentioned, there's financial burdens of education, there's financial barriers to education. And so overcoming that takes, again, education, but also communication and networking. Those networks exist for some communities and not others. So really reinforcing networks and expanding the reach of existing networks is important. A lot of companies will talk about their incredible diversity hiring numbers and not point to the fact that their leadership is not diverse. They have one woman in a senior role. They have one person who is not Native-born American in a senior role. Those types of things create a narrative for some young people, early career practitioners, where they don't see a path forward for themselves. But more harmfully, the people in those roles don't see a path forward for those people. They're not used to seeing someone at the table that looks like this. And so when it comes time to choose who's the next person at the table, a lot of education has to go into anti-bias training, into the types of modern workforce education and understanding that is necessary to impact that. And then in the middle, you have a flight. You have people who are burned out, who are exhausted. You have some people who they made a decision about what they wanted to do when they were 17 years old. And at 36 are like, this is not right. Like, this is not me anymore. So capturing those people is important because they have a lot of information to share with people who are in the early stages of their career. So not losing through attrition people who just decide this isn't what they want to do for whatever reason, whether it's a new career, whether it's a different path, etc. In the middle, I would say between year 2 and year 10, the frustration will mount, and hearing stories from practitioners who are beyond 15 years can help. So even if I would encourage people, even if you are not in a position to directly influence promotion, you are in a position to directly influence survival. There are people there who feel isolated because they are the only one in the room. They are the only one in a lot of rooms. And that isolation contributes to what I think is that just thinning of the herd when it comes to who can be considered for promotion. There's a number that face regulated industries, and I'll talk about healthcare specifically, where you have healthcare practitioners who have regulations that affect their practice, regulation that affect their professionalism, regulations that impact the information that they have about patients and the participants in clinical studies. You have these number of regulations, and then there are regulations about how those regulations work together. There's a lot of need for regulatory expertise in this area for that reason. The doctor doesn't need to know how to make sure that he can transfer files to another doctor securely. He doesn't need to know how that happens. He just needs to know that he has an obligation to make sure that is happening. And there's tech experts that will work in that space and help facilitate that. If you think about other things that are impacting the industry right now, artificial intelligence and the conversations about how that is regulated is going to be presenting significant challenges over the next several years. We see proposed legislation in Europe. Other countries are going to be following suit, no doubt. The goal is to protect people, especially vulnerable populations who have traditionally been the victims of new technology. But on the flip side, artificial intelligence can improve equity. It can improve patient outcomes. They're positive and they're negatives, but I think the regulation is seeking to try to create a balance where one may not exist currently, or if an imbalance appears, will severely harm populations who are already disadvantaged. I think it's an interesting and very complicated time also because you have actors who are in the space who are seeking to abuse the technology that exists. And so having people that understand how to protect systems, how to protect information, how to protect people who are relying on technology, that is very important. I think that there's a number of different pathways to this space. The regulation seeks to protect. The regulation may also have the impact of causing harm. So where you can have guidance, counsel, advice about how to navigate that, I think that for those who are in areas of compliance, or if you have a small business in this space, that is a critical support. There's actually a couple of different ways that don't involve going to law school. So I want to start there. There are a number of programs across the country that are LLMs in law, but not relying on a JD. So it's a master's in law, basically. There are paralegal programs that allow you to do a lot of support work for legal teams. There are other programs that are tied to compliance that support legal teams, but also support the business and bring in a lot of structure. Program management is something that I think our teams rely on very heavily. There's a lot of different ways that I think that you could approach this. And then there's just like doing what I did and saying, okay, I'm going to put in the 3 years and go to law school and start over, but this is what I know I want to do. So that's an option. This is a second career for me. Once I realized that's what I wanted to do, I took the time, I studied for the exams, I saved money, I sold a car, like I did what I had to do to put the money together to not only lessen the debt burden, but also prepare myself to be in that space and focus full time. That was really important. And I think it is important for anybody who is looking at going back to school to consider. There's a couple of different groups of people who are concerned. I would say that there are lawyers who are concerned about whether or not the AI is being trained to replace lawyers, the judgment of lawyers, the education and understanding of lawyers. So there's this sort of fear around the professional impact. There is concern about how large language models are being trained. So whether or not people understand how these models are developed and how the models evolve, where they're getting data from. You may have consented to your data being used in one way at one time, and then it is used in another way at another time through sale. And because the law has changed, the sale of that data may have been very well have been legal at the time that it was done, but it exists now in a format or a forum that you might want to know more about, but you can't know more about because of the way the technology has moved. So I think that there's concerns about how models are being developed, but also how they're being used. And this has been something that has been an issue for years. You know, you and I are both from the New York area, and you know that after the towers went down, there was so much profiling that was happening of people of color. I will say, you can decide if you want to edit this part, but you would always hear light-skinned Black or Hispanic male. And it's like, that's like a third of the men who live in New York City. Like, that is not a reasonable description. And that became light-skinned Black, Hispanic, or Middle Eastern. Like, it became like this wider swath, and it was abused by people. And then technology was developed to support that abuse. And people are definitely afraid of that. You think about predatory lending in the mortgage industry. Will the AI help banks keep minorities from owning homes? Will it force only mortgages in some areas, allow mortgages in some areas? Will it force people out of living in areas that they could afford because the AI has been trained with bias? There's definitely a fear. So this is probably the place to start that answer. There's definitely a fear about bias in the content development, in the large language model development. There's definitely a fear of bias in the use of machines, whether it is to eliminate jobs, to marginalize communities, to increase the impact of law enforcement that is discriminatory and other discriminatory practices. I think as lawyers, we are looking at how legislation can help, but we are also looking at how this technology impacts our profession. I think from the healthcare space, as I mentioned before, there are definitely voices that are looking at the opportunities to improve patient outcomes that AI can support, but also understanding that the models are being trained with the data that is available, and the data that is available is skewed. And so how we compensate for that is something that I think a lot of people in this space are considering and working on solutions. There's so much information out there that developing a critical eye for sources is important. Now that machines are creating the information, it is very important to understand what you are reading and to question what you are reading. Question the sources, question the agenda of the bullhorn that it's coming from. One thing that I know is top of mind for people is the recent Supreme Court case that addressed affirmative action in higher education. I know that that's frightening for a lot of people. I think that what I would say to people who are nervous about that is this is not the end of the conversation. We have a long history of fits and starts, of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and we can do more by being strong in our convictions that affirmative action was designed to right wrongs in the past. There are people who are not interested in that, and that's, addressing that is a conversation for people who are in the space of politics. But in terms of opportunities, there are people who are committed to this work. Find them, support them, use them, speak to them, help them, be them, and do more so that this doesn't impact a generation of students. I think it's very important. These conversations are happening not only at schools, but inside of companies. And in order to be thoughtful, we need people who are participating. And life is hard. Work is hard. It is easy sometimes to just unplug and say, let it be somebody else's job. And you don't have to do everything, but it is important to do something. Every voice in a chorus is important, but the chorus only has impact when everyone is singing. So I would say, do not let yourself be silenced and keep pushing forward. It is more important now than ever. So first thing to understand is that it is not what you see on television. It is not. There are some fun things that show up on TV shows, but most of it is not what you see. If you are someone who loves learning, who loves communicating, this is a great place to practice. I think understanding technology and being able to communicate it to different types of people is a core strength. Spending your days with people who are very passionate about science and technology is an amazing benefit. If that sounds attractive, just be relentless. Do not allow obstacles to stop you. They can slow you down. They can cause you to rethink your strategy about moving forward, but don't stop moving forward. Wherever there's a wall, there's ways around it. You can be like Cesare Borgia and blast through it. You can dig a tunnel under, you can go around, you can go over, but the wall is not the obstacle. If I were to talk to the version of myself that was in law school, in the library late at night, really wondering whether or not what I was doing was the right choice, I would say you've got to trust your gut. Your gut can tell you when you are making a mistake. You can decide not to listen, but you have to listen, and you can trust it if it's telling you this is what's right. I would say do not allow anyone to gatekeep education. If someone says that you can't know something, don't take that for an answer. You find someone else who is willing to teach you. You find another way that you can learn. There are organizations that have scholarships for people who are interested in an area to attend conferences. There are ways that you can even volunteer, and that will be the compensation to the organization for allowing you to attend some of the trainings. do the work to find out how you can learn more, and do not allow anybody to gatekeep information or opportunities from you because of education. So I think that in the beginning, I was hesitant to, if someone said, well, no, you can't go to that training, I would just sort of take no for an answer. And it was literally watching somebody not take no for an answer that was like, oh, I actually don't have to listen to that. And I just have to that was a no from this avenue. That doesn't mean that's a no from me.